Hello, and welcome to Cry Havoc Wargaming, dedicated to bringing you the uncommon. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ron, and today we're going to do a review of Battlespace by Table Salt Games and Modiphius. So let's get started. Table Salt Games contacted me and asked me to look into their game Battlespace, and I did a review of it and became kind of fond of it. And it has become a very popular game amongst my wargaming club. Now, I should probably mention, calling it a popular game with a club, and if you're familiar with the game, might be a little surprised by that because it is promoted as a tabletop solo game. I'm very much of the opinion that most solo games can, with very little work, be turned into cooperative games, and this is a great example of one that can, because the various characters on a side are all pretty equal. It's very easy just to divvy those up amongst the various players, or have two players now in the new roles play a different fire team. But that's neither here or there. This is written as a solo game. It can be played solo, it can be played cooperative. I don't think it could really be played as it stands right now as player versus player without some substantial changes. But I've been waiting for a long time. The news was shared with us a long time ago that Modiphius was going to take over the printing. Originally, through Table Salt Game, the game was available as a print on demand. Well, you'd buy the PDF and you'd print on demand from Wargames Vault. That's how I got my original version. There's a lot of cards involved, so that's an awful lot of printing, and I don't know about you, but I hate printing cards. So I was excited for that reason that it was being picked up by Modiphius and it was going to be made into a hard copy version. Also, it was going to be a more deluxe version and a bunch of things were added. So I'm very excited about it, waiting for it for some time. In fact, it's still not available. I just told you it was in a hardback cover, and here I have a PDF version of it in a 3-leaf binder. The game is in pre-order right now at the time of the filming of this video, which is in January of 2024. It's not meant to be released until April of this year, but it is under pre-order right now. You can buy it in advance. It is a little pricey. I think it was $48. I do recommend that you be careful where you buy it. It's being sold through two different Modiphiuses, Modiphius in Britain and Modiphius in the US. And the shipping can vary tremendously. So you want to be sure that you're buying it from the right place. That has caused some confusion on the Facebook page for Battlespace, which is why I mention it. So I'm going to do a little review of the new version of the book. There's a review of the game. I have a couple of games, I believe, that I did in the past on my channel. I'm going to be doing one with the new rules very, very shortly. What I've done is I printed out the PDF. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the quality of the materials and things because I don't actually have the materials. Now I mentioned the price. I'll talk about that first. The price is, I think, $48. The original PDF was, I think, $10 or something. It was definitely under $20. That sounds a little high, particularly for a 48-page book, but there are a tremendous number of cards that are necessary for the game. And mine are all still printed. Mine are all still printed out, and that's a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of effort. And my understanding is that the official set, when it comes out, is going to have printed cards. That's probably where a lot of that money is going. Maybe not, because the new 5 Parsecs book is also 48. More pages, though. So I wanted to talk about that first. I think it's worth it, but it is a substantial amount. One of the things that they've done, I've kind of hinted at it already, that I think is brilliant, and more companies are starting to do this. I love when you're doing a pre-order, particularly when they send you a PDF in advance. I am only being able to play this game right now by the new rules, only familiar what's actually in here because I have the PDF already. So I think that's good, and that helps make the wait a little less of a problem. So let's talk about the book. This book is a real improvement over the previous one. That's to be expected, I think. Modiphius is an experienced gaming company, a very good professional company, and so it has way increased the quality of the product itself. The game itself is relatively unchanged. There's only a few minor details. In fact, it's kind of hard to find them because they're so minor. But the rules are, the pages are each have more information than the original rules did on a page. They are well laid out. It is easy to find what you're looking for. Some of the things that were a little unclear before are much clearer in the new rules, so that's good. There's a whole lot of diagrams, but more diagrams than were in the previous books that help explain how line of sight works, how cover works. So all of that is very, very good. The biggest changes in the rules probably are in the vehicle rules. There's some much more attention being given to vehicles than were in the original rules. New types of vehicles are included. I'm pretty sure that there were not air or helicopters specifically in the game, which there are now. So that's been really thought out and taken further out. There's a whole example of a game. My favorite parts of the new rules is they've expanded the available starting factions. Some of these were available if you bought expansion packs before, but the original game came with enough guys to make, 2 fire teams. Nowadays you have a choice of several different factions, including international factions. There's CIA, Delta, SAS, Spetsnaz, Navy SEALs. They've also increased the number of kind of enemies. In the past it was insurgents. In the original rules later there was insurgents, militia, and then there were some officers for those groups. But now there's a crime syndicate. That could be a mafia, it could be a cartel. It's kind of unclear, but that's the nature of these rules. They're very, very abstract. They're very easy to alter and change to be other things. There is a professional military contractor PMC group, Dark Lake Tactical. Then there's the insurgents I mentioned and the militia. They've increased the number of scenarios that come in the game. Some of the scenarios are the very same scenarios, so I kind of like the new maps better than the old ones, but they've added a few, and there's a small campaign in here as well, a sample campaign using the criminal syndicate and the PMCs. So that's all really a step forward. There's a glossary here on the back explaining what their terms mean. A QRS, a few pages long. Now I keep saying I'm going to talk about it and I keep skipping over it. One of the things they've done that I think is great is not only have they expanded the factions available, both villains and soldier factions, but they have rules for creating your own and how to do that. And I think that's a real step forward. Particularly if you want to do some other factions or step outside of the lines. Like I've been thinking about doing a DEA or police thing. I may just use CIA. I'm not really convinced on that yet. That's probably the most interesting part of these new rules to me, is the ability to actually have a guideline to how to set up your own characters, your own games. I have some videos that show some games being played. I'm going to be doing another one very shortly. But basically, for those of you who are not entirely unfamiliar with Battlespace, Battlespace is a very easy, quick play, sort of beer and pretzel-y, though it has a much better feel than a beer and pretzel-y game we normally have, to do very modern wargaming as a solo game. Part of why it's so simple is because of how abstract it is, and its abstraction makes it actually very easily to pull into other genres. There's no reason you couldn't turn this into a World War II game. In fact, I was considering doing that if it turned out I didn't like go 200 hours. I was going to just use everything, all the figures that came with it, and make up Battlespace characters for it, which would be perfectly, would work perfectly fine. I saw on the Facebook page there's somebody playing Star Wars with Stormtroopers using these roles. So because they're so abstract, you can redefine what you're going to call these things and change in the weapons and change them around. Now I mentioned cards, and it's not a card game. The cards do a number of different things, so that's probably worth talking about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different types of cards there are. And the very first one are going to be your soldier cards. The soldier cards have the stats, they have a picture, they have the stats for your various character, they tell you what faction these belongs with. The basic attributes for this game are hit points, combat accuracy, your hand-to-hand ability, and your initiative. All of those stats are on the basic card. Sometimes there's notes. Dahlquist here, he receives +1 to his initiative roll when he's the first in the fire team to attempt an initiative roll during a new player phase. Ross adds 2 to the overall gear points. These will have the basic stats on them. and those are your basic players. In a similar fashion, there's enemy cards. There are a lot more of these than there used to be in the original game, but these give the stats that are necessary for your enemies. In the game, the soldiers are the players' characters, the enemy are whatever else you're using, regardless of whether you're playing a crime syndicate or soldiers. They're always called the enemy. Here, for instance, is the insurgent fighter, a straggler. Straggler has to do with how the groups form on the table and how they're manipulated, part of the AI of the game. Straggler is a character moving on its own, an enemy on its own. But the stats that a enemy has is threat level and hit points, and then with what weapon he's carrying. And these will have notes like this particular one. Devout followers of their faith, these civilian fighters terrorize local people that refuse to submit to their ideology. If there are no other insurgents in line of sight, the insurgent fighter is TL8. So they sometimes have special roles. Like in this case, he feels a little more comfortable if he's not alone. I just reminded myself when I read this card that it talks about terrorizing local people. That's one of the improvements of the rules, is there's a lot more detail on how to deal with civilians than there was in the original game. And there was a bit about civilians in there, but they detailed that out a little bit better, and that's really fun for a modern sort of game. And so these cards are just to remind you of the different stats for the different sides. Every one of these cards is repeated, by the way, in the new book. That's something different than what they had before. In fact, you could probably roll on dice if you didn't want to print the cards. So the way the game works is you pick a team from the various soldiers available. They don't all have to be the same faction, but they get special faction abilities that they can do if they are the same faction. Usually you play a fire team. That's 4. There's rules now for playing 2 fire teams or a fire team and portions of another fire team. We were doing that before sometimes with the club. I don't remember exactly how we determined the enemy number. It's a little different than what they chose, but obviously if you're going to have more soldiers, you need to amp the threat. So you pick your guys, then they have a certain number of points each. I mentioned it when I was reading the notes for the original soldiers. You have gear points, and those gear points are spent on gear cards. This is only your extra gear. Your character is assumed to have a sidearm and a primary weapon. Well, it could become a secondary, but the basic soldier, without purchasing any of these cards, is basically carrying his service rifle and a sidearm. These are extra things. The medic, for instance, allows you to do first aid. So these have a cost represented by hand grenades. That's how many you get for the points you have. Some of them have limited uses, some do not. This is going to include your advanced weapons. There's a designated marksman, for instance. That weapon replaces his primary weapon. There's a FNSCAR and suppressors. There's an attack dog, which is one of my favorites. Translator, that's a really useful one. But the grenades are in here. The machine gun is in here, and things like that. These you pick out and you assign to your various soldiers, and there's a loadout before the game begins. So when you play, you have a mission that you have to encounter. The mission scenario will tell you where your deployment area is and where you start your game, and it'll have some deployment areas for the original starting enemy. There's also now rules for creating scenarios or guidelines on how to do that. It wouldn't have been that hard to create them on your own, but now there's guidelines for it. Usually, sometimes there's a leader character that might be part of your scenario, but typically you're going to have a combination of stragglers or elements. The turns begin with the activation of the soldiers, the soldier phase. And so each soldier, when he goes to activate, he rolls his initiative. This is a D20 game. You do need to have a D6 for some of the random numbers that come up in the game. There's things that are D3 or a D6 to determine the number of enemy or in an element, for instance, or something. But mostly you're using D20s. And so to roll your initiative, you're going to roll a D20. You want an initiative number or over. If you fail, you then use a sit rep card. The sit rep cards are basically what activates the enemy. They're going to have their own phase, But this gives them an activity outside of their normal phase progression, outside their normal turn order. If you succeed in initiative roll, then you're able to take 2 actions, and there's a list of what those actions are. They could be a move, shoot, aim and fire. There's a number of different choices available to you. But if you fail, don't do anything at first. You pull a sit rep card, and like this one I just pulled, says, I have movement. A straggler enters the mission area from the nearest building or terrain feature, car door, building door, bush, etc., and the soldier with the highest initiative. If 2 or more soldiers have an equal initiative, the player must choose. So this is going to bring a new straggler onto the table, somewhere pretty close to the soldiers. So you would play the sit rep card, and then the soldier that failed his initiative would now be able to take 1 action. He still gets to do something, but he only gets to do 1 action instead of 2. Once all 4 or more if you have 2 teams, once all of your soldiers have the opportunity to make their actions and to finish their turn, it then goes to what's called the sit rep phase. So you may have already played a number of sit rep cards, but this is the actual sit rep phase, which begins by pulling another sit rep card. For instance, in this case, I get regroup. This is actually one that's an advantage to your soldiers. Some of them are. They're usually negative. These are normally giving actions to the enemy. They may bring in new enemy. They may bring a special enemy. They may just give an action to the enemy that are on the table. But some of them are actually beneficial to the players. For instance, it's possible to get an unexpected CIA sniper. This particular one is regroup, which gives all active soldiers in the fire team 1 free move order immediately. If there are 2 more fire terms in the mission area, then choose which one fire team to regroup. So you're getting an extra move. And this can be important. A lot of these games, a lot of the scenarios are to get off the table at a certain time, or to rescue a hostage and get them off the table at a certain time, or maybe you're saving some other soldiers who are trapped. So these things all, extra moves are helping you. What I want to say about this game, glad that the rules have been improved and that it's a little more convenient to use. I love the fact that there's better vehicle rules, particularly for a modern wargaming game. I love the fact that there is guidelines now for making your own changes and alterations. You could have always done that, but you'd be guessing and probably having to struggle with balance to the game or keeping it enjoyable for a while. The thing I want to bring across, though, is it is all very, very abstract. It is very, very simple. The main stat of the whole game is the enemy's threat level. That represents how dangerous they are. So the higher it is, the more frightening they are. When you're playing the game, it's a solo game, so you're the only player. When you roll to hit an enemy on a d20, you want to add your combat and roll over the enemy's threat level, equal or over. When your enemy is shooting you, you want to represent that by rolling the d20 and rolling over their threat level. So the higher the threat level, the greater risk you are, the harder it is to achieve what you're doing. But the roll remains pretty much stagnant. It's all guided by that one number. There's modifiers to it which will add to your die roll or reduce or raise the threat levels. Same thing either way. The rules are very simple, very abstract, but it really has a good feel. It's much more enjoyable than it sounds. I do recommend this game. I don't know if the table salt version is still available on Wargames Vault. I suspect that it is. And so if you were hemming and hawing about trying this game, if you're not convinced by watching my videos or any of the other videos that may be online, you could look at the small investment of buying the PDF and then playing the game a little bit before you invest in the more expensive version from Modiphius. I think you'll find that the game is a lot of fun. It's really enjoyable. It's very, very quick to play it solo. It slows down a little bit if you're playing it cooperative, because then you're all talking about what to do and making decisions together. But it also works really well for that, and better than you like. In fact, a number of my players are veterans. They've enjoyed the game still, and it's felt all right to them. The game mentions it was written around veterans and with veterans in mind. I'm going to remind you again that it is on pre-sale. I don't know how long that pre-sale is going to be on, but they're not intending to start shipping these until April, so I suspect that it'll be on pre-sale until sometime in April. I think it's $48. They will send you the PDF with all the different cards and with the basic rules to get you started and playing with while you're waiting. And it really is. It's really an enjoyable game. Again, I have some videos of the game being played by the old rules earlier on, and I have a new one by using the new rules that'll be available very, very shortly. If you tried the game and have comments you'd like to share with us regarding your experience with the game, go ahead and put those in the comments sections down below. Also, if you have any ideas for further content you'd like to see us present here on Cry Havoc Wargaming, we look for that in the comment sections down below as well. If you've enjoyed the video, I hope you'll hit like. And if you'd like to continue to receive more notifications of videos like this one that may help you better determine how to spend your money or time in your tabletop wargaming hobby, then I hope you will hit subscribe and ring our notification bell. Till next time, cheers.